Welcome to podcast number 13 of Women in Leadership Stories to Success with Kathrene. So thank you for joining us. We want to run over a small agenda. So we're going to do a couple of introductions. We're going to discuss kind of where you got to where you are today, where you started and your journey, how the trading environment has changed over the years with the evolution of technology, same as everything, and the most impactful regulatory change that has been in the industry since you've joined it and how that was implemented. And then it'd be interesting to understand from the companies you've been in and all of the different countries that you've been in with businesses, how you found diversity in hiring, and any words of encouragement for females looking to get into that space, compliance, trading, and so forth. So I'll kick us off. So I'm Anna. I work at Interquest. So I am based here in Amsterdam, heading up our European footprint with a specific focus on risk regulation compliance related markets. Over to you.
Hello Anna, I am, as introduced, Kathrene. I'm actually, as you can probably tell from my accent, Australian, and I moved over to Amsterdam 2 years ago now, as part of not quite as a comment, but because we had actually gotten our new license here in Europe, and there was a position available for me, so I was moved from our Australian office to Amsterdam, and it's been a great journey so far. I wear many hats in our local organisation as well as globally, but I guess you could say my main title is Head of Compliance and MLRO.
So aside from the drastic weather change, how have you found it from Australia to here?
Well, I have to say, I had really high expectations when I moved here, because just before I came, I actually read up a lot on the regulatory framework here in Europe. And one of the things that really struck me was how very heavily regulated the European market is.
Oh yeah.
There seems to be a rule for absolutely everything, and really trying to educate myself and wrap my head around these rules, like, specifically from, you have a directive, and then you have a delegated regulation, and then you have the rules, and then the guidance, then you have the RTS and the ITS, and it was a lot.
Yes.
Yeah, but in the end though, I think regulation has the same end point. Like, they have the same goal, which is to have a smooth running, regulated marketplace in which the consumers are protected.
Mm-hmm.
I think we can all agree that that is pretty much what the focus of all of these rules are.
Yeah. Rules are there to kind of help protect and kind of buffer companies from going into a very bad space. Yeah. But then they could also be seen as a hindrance as well, because it's only really with the businesses that are trying to change the way of working and change how we do this and a little bit more innovative and greater. They want to push the boundaries a little bit, whereas this kind of narrows them down the right path.
Well, I'm sure a lot of people agree with that. That is the aim on paper. Now, whether that actually happens in real life, look, I am one of those people who actually am for regulation, and I think we need it. Like with all other aspects of it, like in sport, you need rules. Yeah, you need rules to make sure that people are protected, that everybody is playing by the same rule book, as they say, but also really to give those participants in the markets in this game a chance to really optimize where they are there. And sometimes that is going to be pushing boundaries, but nothing is static.
No,
so
you have a little wiggle room.
Yeah, there is some wiggle room, and there's a lot of nascent industries right now that are really testing everybody and challenging old mindsets.
Yeah.
And we need that. I really do believe that in this space we need that, because what was okay or what was considered standard even just 5 years ago is so different. And then from 10 years before that, and then 50 years before that, it's completely unrecognizable to what was even happening 100 years ago now. And 100 years in our time actually is not a long period of time.
No. But if you think about the evolution of it behind it, even for like last year, for example, how much regulatory landscapes have changed.
Yeah.
But also I think kind of the regulator's mindset is changing.
Yes.
With some education behind it. But we'll touch on that a little bit further. But I suppose kind of coming back to you almost, what would you say from where you started, How have you got to where you are today? What's been the key kind of points in this?
So when I started at a very tender age of being a late teenager, I was actually a junior for one of the big Canadian banks based in Sydney. And I did the traditional way of working myself up to where I needed to be in order to get promoted, in order to get skill set. And it was a very defined phase.
Yeah.
It was a very defined pathway. You studied this, you worked maybe 2 years, you tried to get another senior role if you could, and then you would move on to another organization, and then you would try and again work yourself up until you got into the senior role. So it was very linear. And I think for a lot of pathways, they were definitely like that.
Yes.
But then while I was working for the Commonwealth Bank, I started exploring secondments into other parts of the business to see whether really becoming a manager for the same department is what I wanted to do. And I was actually seconded to something like corporate security, which was completely different, but I think that was the whole point. And so for that very short secondment period that I had, I actually really enjoyed it. So I thought, actually, this is nice. Yeah, this is good. I love the analytic investigative part of that, but it really didn't go anywhere. It was just an experience, a nice experience that I had. And then the GFC happened.
Yes.
And the world blew up, basically.
I was going to say, that's when we all kind of went, ooh.
Yeah, and so I was working for the Commonwealth Bank at the time, but then I also really had to make a decision on where I wanted to be professionally. And I did the crazy thing at the time, and I resigned, and I moved to the UK in the middle of the GFC.
How was that? You've lived a few places, so you've probably dealt with quite a lot of different...
Yeah, so one of the first questions the recruiter asked me when I was looking for a job was, why in the world did you move to the UK in the middle of the GFC when people were laying off bankers?
Yes.
And this is your specialty. And I just went, it's an adventure. No risk, no gain.
I like that mindset.
I'll go in there and I'll try to convince them I'm the best person for this role that you've got right now, and I'll do my best. And that's what I did. And so I got a job with another bank, and then my second role was actually with RBS. And it was in a department that, for the life of me, I can't remember what it is anymore, but it's the one that was actually looking at the relationships that they had after the government had brought them out because of the GFC, so the government bailout. And again, because of that investigative part, I just thought it was actually pretty cool.
Yeah, there's something interesting.
Yeah, there's something really interesting in there. And so, fast forward to when I returned back to Australia, I started working for a small broker, doing nearly exactly the same thing I was doing before, but it was a retail broker this time. And so how did I get into compliance? That's probably the question that you're asking and the audience is asking. How did I get into it? Well, by accident is the honest answer.
Because into it.
Yeah, I did. We had a regulatory request, like just a standard regulatory request. It just so happened that my director at the time was literally leaving to go to London.
Oh, okay.
And I was around, and I offered my help. And so while he was in London, I put together all the paper, I did the submission and the preparation on his behalf. 3 months later, they came back and they had another query, and I said, do you want me to answer this? And so I did. And so the next time we had a regulatory query, it came straight to me.
See, it's one of those things where you do it once and then they think, oh, we can rely on
and
so, let's ask again and again.
Yeah, and so that's basically how I got into compliance. It's because I enjoyed it. I enjoyed really learning about the regulations and the laws, which I kind of touched on at a very surface level when I was doing operational banking. But then now I'm really getting into behind the scenes of, okay, what do you need to have a financial institution run properly within the laws?
Mm-hmm.
What are the best practices?
How does it go?
Regulations? Yeah, like as my good friend Shirley says, what does good look like? And when you know what that looks like, you can really put together a compliance framework that is not just acceptable, but also will help the company thrive. Like, I don't believe that compliance should be a hindrance.
That's where it's been seen so wrongly over the past years. Is it's seen as a no function?
Yeah.
If you go into compliance, you get a no.
Yeah.
And so I feel like that's where people's mindsets, but also utilisation of compliance has had to change. And I think when COVID happened, that's when it really became at the forefront of a really important adoption where boards then suddenly started having a very for mindset for compliance.
Yeah, it's interesting that because, like you said, this mentality of compliance is you put them somewhere in the corner, somewhere in the
basement.
And they only ever came to you when something was blowing up. A lot of financial institutions never realized that you could partner with your GRC team, with your governance, risk and compliance team.
Yeah.
So they never utilized it. But I remember saying to one of our sales guys before, listen, I'm the person who needs to know what the rules are.
Yes.
So if you have an idea, come to me first and we'll work it out.
Yeah.
Because we don't want to waste time and you go out and do all of this work, go to the client and say this and this and that, and then you come to me and I say, oh, well, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, but that's
Let's do that. So come to me, let's talk about it. And I really wanted to establish that relationship of, hey, I'm here to help you. Again, you may not be able to do this, but hey, the rules will let you do this.
Yeah.
Have you considered this?
It's like the commerciality to
Yeah.
compliance.
People still see compliance as a cost center, which in a way it is, but we have to change the mindset of compliance actually can be a profit center. We are there to, first of all, help you understand the rules, to play within the rules, because the less fines you have, the more money for you. That is profit. And you can cut this out, like, if what I'm going to say is a bit controversial.
No.
But the thing is, I think it's actually quite sad that a lot of the big banks and a lot of institutions actually budget for enforcement and fines now.
I mean, it's a smart way of doing it.
Yeah.
Because it happens. So if you budget for it, you're not at a loss. However, preempting fines shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's a sad industry, it's sad that the industry has kind of accepted that you will break a rule somewhere or other, but if you're big enough and you can put a budget away, you'll get away with it.
Yeah.
And as somebody who's worked in SMEs and brokers, independent brokers, when I no longer work for banks, I actually find that a little bit unfair because it does not even, it's an uneven playing field basically, that if you have money, you will get away with a lot of things. And, I think anyone who's just in compliance and gets these news on a regular basis, every day you've got some sort of enforcement action. And fine, and it's sad because if you are an independent broker or a small medium enterprise, you can't budget for €1 million fine.
No, you can't. Like, if you're an SME, how would you physically even try to budget that?
Yeah.
Let alone be able to budget it.
Yeah. So I do believe that the SMEs, who are in here for the long haul, they're the ones who are actually the most compliant, who've got a really strong framework because they want to do the right thing because, as we said, they can't actually afford the fines and the enforcement actions. So how does a compliance officer fit into that? Well, if you know the rules very well and you understand your business and you partner with the business and you're not so scared of saying, hey, have you considered this? Or, one of the tactics that I always do whenever I know I'm going to give a no answer is, this is a no, but have you tried looking at this?
Yeah, it's an alternative rather than a roadblock.
Yeah, so that changes the mindset now of people. And I have actually noticed, I have to admit, when people come to me and question, they're like, okay, so I have this idea now, what do you think? Give me a hand. As opposed to, well, oh, I've done this, sorry. It's like,
do now, ask later.
Yeah, so it's like,
them.
Exactly. So I think having, being brave enough to actually have these conversations before anything happens, and being able to tell your team and work with your team to say, I'm not here. I don't want to be here as a hindrance. Sometimes I do have to say no, but hey, my expertise is knowing the rules. So let's talk about what you want to do, and then let's see whether we can actually get something to happen within the rules that we're allowed to play in.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. So I suppose as well, just kind of touching across the industry, you've worked with the banks, and there's a whole camaraderie around joining traders or brokers.
Yes.
Because everyone sees it as it's really male heavy and front office traders, they're just shouting on the phones all day, every day. But you've been in that industry for quite a while, having moved from big banks to brokers and also to the like inner financial market space. So what took you into that area, and what's your whole? How do you view the environment? What keeps you in it?
I actually genuinely enjoy the fast pace of the financial markets. Don't get me wrong, I have actually sometimes tried to say, okay, is this now the time to pull the plug? But I keep coming back because I do genuinely like the space. And as altruistic as this is going to come across, when I was working for the banks and the focus was definitely helping up traders make money, that for me didn't really connect with what my moral stance was.
Yeah.
There was always that element of, okay, there's got to be something more than what I'm doing now. Moving into compliance fulfills that part of my need, because the ethical part of me says there's nothing wrong with making money if you do it the right way.
Yes. Yeah.
And so my job, I see my job is basically that, is helping people run a business, because that's what brokers and institutional finance firms are, but doing it the right way. So they're not going to be taking advantage of people. Like, they're not going to be a resource for scammers, that kind of thing. They're not just going to try and game the system and take advantage of people who are less knowledgeable. That's my job, to sit there and go, actually, this isn't just about barely passing the rules and ticking the boxes of what you can and can't do. This is actually having a culture that involves ethics as well.
Yeah, because it brings a little bit of everything to the table, but you get involved in pretty much the end-to-end business of it.
Yeah.
I suppose compliance in trading companies has changed probably faster than any other sort of industry, just due to technology advances, because it is highly analytical.
Yeah.
So I suppose within a trading environment, how have you seen that change within the having that technology enhancement?
We were talking about the fast pace of change at
Yes.
the beginning. Let me tell you a story. My first job when I was a junior, my most important job actually was keeping the printer going.
Really?
Okay, you're probably too young, but have you ever used a dot matrix printer? Okay, so for those who were born after 1990, a dot matrix printer is basically a printer that had like a wheel, like a typewriter, and it had spokes in it, and you had paper, usually carbon paper, that had the spokes on the end, so that it kind of like wrapped around, and it would go.
Oh yes, on the typewriter.
Yeah, so like a typewriter where you've got the ribbon.
Yeah.
This is like a printer. It's got a needle, and it basically just prints it across. And it's called dot matrix. It's literally dots, like fast bit dots. As the junior settlements officer for the bank I was working in, my job, my most important job, was to keep that dot matrix printer going. Why? Because it was attached to the trading system.
Okay.
This was our records for record management. If that dot matrix printer went down, it would shut down the entire trading system.
So it feels like a small job, when in reality, it's the backbone to keep the whole business going.
Because so what would happen is, on a really, really busy trading moment or busy trading day, if I didn't already pick up that there was a lot of stuff going on, one of the trader closest to the door would stick his head out and go, "Kathrene, printer!" And I would run to the printer, and I'm just sitting there making sure
anyone run faster.
And my job was to make sure that that thing didn't jam, that it kept going, and that when the paper ran out, I had to put the paper in and make sure, put that away, put all the, mark it up, put it in the box, put the correct date and time for it to go out to, to storage kind of thing. That was my job. That was the most important part of my job. Can you imagine now we were still, everything's up in the cloud and everything's like, there's no such thing as latency. No. We were broker voice confirming and faxing confirmations still back then.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Now it's like, it's like, the voice brokers, like, and having to fax them to fax machines and
having it as like documentation rather than online.
Yeah, and but to be fair, by the time I was there was a move, because when you're trading foreign exchange, everyone uses Thomson Reuters. So it was a move to bring that all into the car, so online. But because it was such a nascent technology, nobody was just going to shut off their printers.
No.
So there was both of that, component running side by side to make sure that we were moving into the 21st century, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And so now, like looking back, you're like, okay, even things like latency, how everything had to be hardwired into.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, the closer you were to the server, the faster you get these things.
I have images just sprinting across the floor now.
And yeah, but now you've got high frequency traders who are like the latency is practically non-existent nowadays, and even just with the internet technology, everything that we do nowadays. You know, from the compliance point of view, I think one of the things I love the most is actually how much it actually advantaged record keeping.
Yeah.
Because before it's like you had to put everything into boxes and you had to archive it and then send it off to whoever you were using. And then you had to have really good record management, and then there was a query, you had to know which box thing, you had to call them to say, hey, you can get box number, blah, blah, blah. And then they would deliver it to you, and then you had to go through the, you know, all the records.
Round through it.
Yeah. And then every 7 years or 5 years, whatever it was, you had to get that destroyed. Like kind of thing. Nowadays, everything's in the cloud, and you have
everything is.
Yeah, and like, you know, in the Microsoft 365 environment that a lot of people use in SharePoint, you now have compliance policies where you tag a document, and after 7 years, 5 years, it just gets destroyed automatically. Everything's just.
It's like that next step of thinking, isn't it? There's still a manual element to it, of course, because obviously you can't have a robot go to the regulator and, you know, deploy everything that you're trying to do, because they like the human side of it.
Yes.
How have you found with the fast-paced kind of analytical, ever-changing world of compliance in these types of companies that they've worked with or against you with that?
Well, I do like being a lot more resourced now.
Yeah.
Again, it's like back in the day, you had to have access to a library, and sometimes you had to purchase these gigantic tomes, which would actually help you figure stuff out.
Yeah.
If you didn't have access to it, well then, you better hope you knew somebody in the library who did. Like, they could actually let you, you know, borrow that book kind of thing.
Say, I'll give you a tenner.
Yeah. Nowadays, you can find pieces of legislation online. There's a lot of FAQs. There's forums that you can go to. You can be a part of it. You know, you can be a part of a forum in which you can ask people, hey, has anyone got experience with this? Or you put something on the chat group. Go to webinars now.
It's collaborative.
Yeah, it is a lot more collaboration. And I think this wealth of information that we have now is there for people to use. Now, sometimes it is hard to pass how to use that information. For those of us without a law background, sometimes, you know, the nitty-gritty of the technical side, you do still need to go back to your legal counsel, and that's where collaboration, like, you know, really comes in. And then, you know, being able to use that resource, which gives you tools to go out to your board, to your team, to say, you know, when they come to you, or when you're being proactive, you go to them saying, hey, this is what I think, and these are the things that help me back me up. And you can do that with the power of, like, you know, the internet nowadays. Yes. But also, like I said, with our ability now to collaborate with people all over the world. You don't have to just meet people face to face now.
No, everything's done online. Everything's online, so you can communicate and have that type of background. Whereas beforehand, it was okay, let me look you in the eyes, let's shake hands 10 times, and then let's make a decision.
Yeah.
People, I think when we first went into COVID, had a meltdown around hiring someone they'd never met in person.
Yes.
And that's again a new change, because now they're like, we'll hire them.
That's normal now.
They can move. We don't need to see them.
Yeah.
And it's the same with the kind of groups and also businesses of, as more and more goes online, you're going to see the people that hold back from having that belief in data and using data not really move with the times. So then it's going to be a slight drop off, and then you see the ones who really embed it and take that belief, use it, drive it. But then people are fine with saying, okay, that didn't work. That really didn't work. Let's try a different way. And there's like a left and right, which what you said is it's a no there, but have we thought about this?
Yeah. It is easier to pivot nowadays, but you have to understand, and you have to know the tools that you have at your disposal. And sometimes it is just a matter of, you don't know that you have this tool, or somebody has a resource that you can actually tap into to help you. But I guess, you know, for me, what makes a good one of the things that makes a good compliance officer nowadays, especially, and this is something that I've actually heard talk about in a lot of forums and just amongst compliance officers, is really the good compliance officers are also themselves quite analytical. They know how to think outside the box. They have very good lateral thinking skills, because if your thinking is linear, it's very vertical, very tick box. That will only get you so far. And look, don't get me wrong, we need that type of being able to be very detail oriented and being able to do that vertical thinking. But really, you will eventually get to a certain point of, no, you have to be natural. You have to be able to come up with solutions that are out of the box. You have to be able to look at pieces of legislation and your internal policies and the industry standards and say, okay, within this information that I have, this is what I can put together for you.
Yeah. So I suppose also from where you've worked in so many different regions, so many different companies, there's been so many regulatory changes. Yeah. It's probably unbelievable. Yeah. So if you're looking at the most impactful regulatory change, what would you say that's been over the course of your career, and how was that implemented?
I'm going to pick a period because I think this is it. They all kind of come together.
Yes. Yeah.
Definitely straight after the GFC. Because now all the rules that people thought were in place were now being enforced. And there was now that renewed emphasis on consumer protection.
Yeah.
Right? A lot of people lost a lot during the GFC.
Yeah. A lot.
So there is now that, okay, there's a very conscious effort now to remove the regulation so that we hope that it doesn't happen again. Whether that's successful or not, I'm not going to say, but there was that concerted effort towards consumer protection, transparency, and accountability.
Yeah, two massive phases, the transparency and accountability.
So what ended up happening is we had a raft of regulations to roll out and it never stopped.
Yeah. It's like another one. What? We're going again.
I know, so it's like, when derivatives transaction reporting, kicked in. This was around the mid 2010 period, so around 2015, 14, 15 in Australia, did that project. And then now it's like in the EU, obviously you have EMIR, and then that's just rolled out. Now people are wrapping their heads around it, reconciliation, all this stuff. Now we've got a new refit coming through.
Yes.
And it just seems like there's just a never-ending, not just new regulation, but a revisiting of a lot of regulation. And part of that, is always going to be because there is now this emphasis on transparency and accountability. You need to show us that you've got nothing to hide, and you have to be accountable for your actions. But that does mean that there is a huge, huge compliance burden on financial institutions, especially on the smaller players.
Yeah, because the smaller players are still trying to work out how it is.
Yeah.
And it also comes down to, yes, you need policies, frameworks, and all of this, but how do you make it scalable?
Yeah.
How do you build something which is going to be double, triple the size in 2 years' time? How can you have something in place that helps it scale?
Yeah, and that's definitely a challenge for when you have gotten to the point where you are now, okay, the manual work that we're no longer doing, this is not replicable anymore. We don't have the scale. Something has to get automated. And then now another wonderful part of compliance is now you're in the process of vendor due diligence and, having to swim through this whole environment of who can I use that's affordable, but it gives me everything that I need, but also, has a reputation that is good enough and in the industry long enough that people won't raise eyebrows if I say, yes, I'm using these people.
Yes.
Right? Yes. Reputation counts for a lot.
It's a small group of people in this type of niche, particularly in Amsterdam, whereas reputation is everything.
Yes. And so having that in mind, you can't just, unfortunately, as much as a lot of people would love to sit there and go, I'm going to give the new kid on the block a chance, sometimes that is just not an option.
Yeah.
And so you really have to balance those, okay, this person is willing to give me a massive discount because they're new and they just need new clients with, well, is that part of the risk appetite that my company has? And when we have these formal audits as an investment firm or a financial service provider, can I get away with this? How is this going to look in front of an audit, in front of the regulator? That kind of thing. So compliance really does have to be thought of a key partner in the way that the business runs, not just someone you kind of go to when you need something signed off.
Yes.
If compliance can be really partnered with, you're talking about operational compliance, right? You're talking about
everything.
Stakeholder compliance, everything is a part of it. And, I think it is changing a little bit. I think the mindset is changing a little bit.
Yes.
Being able to understand that, the right compliance person can give so much.
They add a lot of value to a business, but they also help a business kind of beyond just compliance.
Yeah.
Because they help them get to where they want to be. without having to budget and fines.
That's the dream we're all aiming for. That we get there and we don't have to budget.
Yes, that's what we say. We won't need it.
Yes.
But then it's having that kind of alternative commerciality of we are compliant, there is rules, we can't bend regulation.
Correct.
But we can look at alternative ways of working and living with it.
Yeah. I think we do also need to break the stereotype of compliance as anti-business.
Yeah.
Because you can be a compliance officer, be quite commercial. I pride myself in being a commercial compliance officer. I'm not going to break any laws.
No.
I'm always going to work within the rules. But if I am approached, my automatic response first of all is not going to be no. And then the second one is going to be, if I see an opportunity, I am going to be proactive in telling them the whole, this is a no, but have you tried this?
Yeah.
Put in options for people in front of them. Because you don't want to kill business. First of all, you kill the business, you're out of a job, and that's never a good thing. Exactly. We all want, to be paid so we can go on these holidays every year, right?
Oh yes.
Yeah. So I just don't think it's a long-term stance that you should take by always being conservative. Look, if the overall business risk appetite is conservative, then that's different because that comes from the top, the tone from the top. If your governance board says that actually we are never going to take anything that's considered high risk, we're going to stick to low and medium, that's that decision, and you play within that.
Yeah, you stay within the vanilla products. I suppose when you go to a little bit more of an intensity side, it ups the risk and it ups the kind of appetite that you're going to have to put in place, and then the appetite needs to change because you need to accommodate what that impact is going to have. And then it's like all risk versus reward and kind of how that is against what business plans are.
Yeah. Being flexible and being able to sit there and go, okay, at the moment, this is what I have, but understanding that this may change because, we all say that we implement the mythical risk-based approach of how we run a business. But risk appetite changes, that's just the reality.
That's it.
Yeah. Like sometimes you're going to be ultra conservative, sometimes, you're going to be, okay, we have the appetite now for a little bit of risk in certain situations, but most of the time you're in the middle. But you will fluctuate.
Yeah,
a little bit
when you get a bit too high.
And so being a compliance officer who's flexible enough to say, I can operate in this very conservative environment that I'm in, but I'm also ready when to take, to move up into that higher risk, more demanding, more intensive work and engagement from me as a compliance officer when that opportunity arises. And I think for a lot of compliance officers that I've mentored or I've spoken to, it's that fear of, what if I can't handle the responsibility?
Yeah,
which is haunting,
isn't it? When you feel like you can't, I think, and that kind of ties in nicely. So, with your career and having that as well, what would you say the biggest challenge, as well as your biggest achievement, has been?
The biggest challenge probably ties into my biggest achievement has actually been being brave enough to step up and say, "I'll do it."
It's that, isn't it? Because it's also when it's you hold yourself back because it's the thing of what you just mentioned of, am I able to do this?
And I can clearly remember times in my compliance life where, including that first step where, my director was going overseas and I was helping with it. Like, I have no experience with compliance, but I just said, okay, I'll give it a try. They want this, I'll look for it and see, and hopefully I get what they want. Saying yes and pushing yourself to say yes every other time. When I was in Australia and we were applying for a change in the license, like I was not involved at the time because I was purely in, I was the AMLCO, so not a general compliance.
Yeah.
But I actually said, hey, I'm pretty good at writing policies.
Let me have a go.
Let me have a go. Like, do you want, obviously we're really under the pump at the moment, do you want me to have a look? Like, I don't mind, like I enjoy this stuff. Being brave enough to go out there and say, okay, I'll do it. Now, when you're first starting off, you're always going to be afraid to make mistakes and you don't have the knowledge. That's just a given. But then it's also resourcing yourself and having enough trust in yourself that you know where to go to get the answers.
Yeah, you're not going to have the answers, but you can easily go and ask, research, read, everything in between.
Mm-hmm.
But without saying yes, without making mistakes, you don't learn.
Yeah.
You don't learn, and that's where you say you kind of
Yeah, you and look, if that's where you are in the stage of your career, then that's fine. But I always like to challenge people to say, you are probably know more and can do more than you think. Women especially, I must say, we women are so good at seeing the gap in our knowledge.
We are. That is statistically proven.
Yeah, I mean, again, like I'll just refer back to my friend Shelley. She says this all the time. And she was the one who actually very recently gave me a nice kick in the butt again when I had very negative, mindset about my skill set.
Yeah.
It's because women will see the gap and men will sit there and go, I can do that.
Yeah, and then you see the gap and they'll go, wow, I've got this, I've got that.
Yeah, so it's like the men will automatically say, I can build a bridge for that. The women will say, oh, that's a big gap. And I don't know if I have the tools for it, which is a shame because most of us are capable of doing it.
Yeah.
Or even if we're not resourced to do it right now, most of us are capable of finding the resource to be able to do it. And so being able to convince yourself and be brave enough to take a step forward and say, yeah, I can do that. Or, especially once you get to the more senior roles, standing firm on your decision, especially if it's a controversial one.
Yeah. Say it and say it with confidence.
Yeah.
This is the decision.
Yeah. I mean, so many times in my career as a head of compliance, I've actually had to sit there and go, actually, this is my personal opinion. I do not believe in any circumstance that I can say yes to this. No matter how much I twist it, no matter how much I look at it, it's a no. And you will at times have people bloody, how about this and this and this? Other people are doing it. Oh gosh, the worst. My pet peeve when people say, it's like, oh, but no other broker is doing this, or no other broker is asking for this, or no, all other brokers are doing it. And I'm like, well, I can't speak for those other brokers, but I can speak for us.
Yeah.
And this is my stance. And being respectful and being able, especially when you're dealing now with your board and your directors and say, this is my opinion. I understand actually that you are the director and you make the final decision. But this is my very, very strong opinion. And I must say, I've never actually been overridden.
See, this is something that I really love, and it's something which I emphasise to anyone who will listen to me. It's just say yes. Say yes, say yes, say yes to opportunities, because they may feel like it's a setup for failure. You may see that gap as something you're going to jump and sink.
Yeah.
Think about your bridge.
Yeah.
Rome wasn't built in a day, and you're not going to fill that gap knowledge in a day. But it's a consistency of time. And I feel like once you started saying yes to a few other things, that people, majority, you see everyone else go, and then kind of look at the floor, pass it over to Kathrene, who will help. It adds so much value to your skill set, to your mindset, and to your contribution. But think how far you probably get in your career just by saying yes, because you then learn and pick up new things. And if it goes really well, sometimes it's not going to go really well, but it's not really necessarily going to be a kick in the back because you've attempted to try something that other people weren't comfortable with.
And the fear of failure goes hand in hand with the fear of saying yes, because maybe it doesn't work out. But is it the great Michael Jordan who said, you miss every shot that you don't take?
Yes. I love that saying. It's a quote that I really like. And also, just out of pure curiosity, what was that kick that you recently got?
Well, I was actually looking to do something that was really, really out of the box for me. And I said, okay, it seems like they need this person to do this. And I don't have the qualifications or the experience to do this, this, and this, and this. And she said, well, you've got the qualifications experience to do everything else. Yeah. And you do need
you need that person to just kind of say, give your head a wobble, sort yourself out. You're going over here into this mindset of you can't fill the gap. Stop it.
Yes. And you know what? That is like, the thing that, if we have this, if I could actually give a word of wisdom to anyone going into this space, especially women, is become a member of a tribe. I'm going to say that again, become a member of a tribe. Don't just join a tribe, but become a member. And when I say that, I mean actively. Now, however much active looks like to you is going to change from different people. But I say that because Sometimes you are the feeder and sometimes you are the receiver. And you never know when your experience is going to be absolutely critical for somebody else. But unless you engage, unless you become an active member of a tribe, you won't know who you're going to be helping in the future.
No, and you won't know where you need help.
Yeah, and one of the most beautiful things that I've actually only very recently actually discovered in the last couple of years is how important those tribes are. Because if you find a group, whether it's an online forum or like, a group of professionals that you meet with on a regular basis, sometimes you're going to go to them and, and listen to what they're saying and, take from what they're talking about. And you're building up your knowledge just from what other people have experienced. And then one day they're going to say something like, oh, I tried to do this and it didn't work. And you can say, we had something really similar happen to us. It's not the same, but this is what happened with us. And now you're sharing.
And you're looking at
and your knowledge with people.
Because how they experienced it isn't necessarily how you did.
Exactly.
And vice versa.
Yeah.
So I really like that. Find your own tribe.
Yeah. Tribes are important, especially for women. I think we need to really stop competing with each other.
Stop doing this, it's my knowledge, you'll do this, you're only going to take it and go above me. It's like they get pit against each other.
Yeah.
And the men just work together, have a laugh, and so forth. Whereas women, it not so much anymore, but previously it was right, this is my bit, this is my knowledge, and stuff you almost.
Yeah.
Whereas now it's like, hey, let's see what you've done, let's see what I've done, I've thought of this, what have you thought of, let's come to X, Y, Z together.
Yeah. And just going back to what you said earlier about diversity in the hiring and in the workplace, definitely when I started, if you didn't have thick skin, if you didn't have thick skin, you weren't lasting.
No. It's one of those when they used to walk in and they'd put bets down. Bet where she's 1 week.
Rather unfortunately, it was actually the case. The environment, although it was very much changing at the time, we were no longer in the Wolf of Wall Street, crazy period.
Yeah.
But also, you can't erase 100 years worth of culture.
No.
So there was really a very, very slow progressing, but you had that snowball effect as once it started, but it was just very slow in happening. So it was almost like rolling a snowball up a hill, but once you got to the peak, it would actually just roll itself down the hill. But when I first started, we were actually still trying to push that snowball up the hill. And so the women who made it into senior management were unfortunately stereotyped as being a bit of a ballbuster, excuse the French.
It's fine.
Yeah. Or they slipped their way to the top.
That winds me up so much.
It was rather unfortunate and very untrue because there were a lot of very gentle and kind, competent people at that level who didn't feel like they needed to fight with the men to be heard.
No.
But it is a very inaccurate but unfortunate stereotype.
How has the diversity evolutionized as that kind of snowball analogy kind of got to the peak?
Yeah. Look, I know there's a debate now about whether, let's say, the whole women in management, regulation that says that you must have X amount of women in the board. And I'm not going to opine on that because there's two sides of that story. But what I will say, I think, if we want to look at it positively, having that in place at least broke a couple of mindsets that only men could do this role.
Yes.
Being able to say, okay, I'm forced to do this now because it was a role, so I'm now forced to actually find someone who I think is competent, right? It's begrudging, yes, I have to admit, but it got women to the table. And those women, when they proved themselves, slowly eroded that mindset of only a man could do the job.
Yeah.
Women CEOs now, I know in some industries it's still,
it's still
but it's not as uncommon anymore to see women as CEOs, women in the highest leadership in government.
Yes, yeah.
That is now common, right? And
it's not seen as, oh my God, it's
yes.
It's like, oh yeah.
I mean, look at that Fat F picture of, was it the Fat F where they, one of those big panels where they all got together and they all stood on the steps, kind of thing, all the leaders, the representatives of the highest echelons of this organization. There was 2 women. And it was this massive conversation
around those two
about this photo.
So mind blown.
Yeah.
And it's also some people just see a woman on board and say, HR.
Unfortunately, or making up the numbers.
Yes.
But
Adding in diversity.
Oh my God, there's a diversity requirement. There's the charge, yes. But that part we don't like, obviously. But I will also back to it's these women who fought to stay on, even if it was in hostile circumstances.
It's like, no, I belong here. I can do this, and I will prove myself. And I haven't set my.
Yes, exactly. And I think for the women who are there now and they're looking at male-dominated industries that are still there, and I like to believe that at this time, we actually should have an easier go at being able to prove that we're just as good, and hopefully it will lead us to not having to have something like International Women's Day, because
then we just get frowned upon.
Well, look, I understand the concept of International Women's Day, let's celebrate women achievement, let's make it so that we're forced to celebrate, but that also implies
we're different.
And it also implies that back then our achievements weren't considered something to be talked about. So again, it's just changing the mindset, and it's the women who were trailblazing and being brave, and being going out there and saying, hey, I'm going to give it a go. There's a risk rule.
Say yes.
Yeah, just say yes. Just going to add, because I was talking about the tribe. Earlier, find your allies as well in them.
They can help as well.
Yeah, and especially if your board are entirely male. I must say, I am so incredibly thankful that my directors and have been so incredibly open to what I've brought to the table.
Yeah.
And having a director who is willing to listen, may not always agree with you, but will sit there and listen to you right until the end, makes such a difference. It's such a confidence booster. So finding those allies, especially in senior management, who can actually give it to you straight, because sometimes they say, okay, great idea, but this is not what our business is about. Yeah, you tweak it now, all right? You're learning from that. You won't ever.
It's not a no, but they
Yeah.
listen and they take it on board and they say, I get where you're coming from. Not really where we're looking to go. So how would you change it?
Yeah. And so that whole having, let your tribe also have your allies there. And sometimes your ally is someone who, when you talk to them, it seems as though they're always finding something wrong with what your proposal is. But you also need those people to help you refine. Refine your arguments. When you bring yourself to the table, you're now refined in how you're going to respond to these questions that you're going to get. So we need everybody. We definitely need more cheerleaders. But we also need our allies. And one of the things that always really upset me when I worked for an organization, when I saw that management were just filled with yes men, yes women.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. I mean, we have a lot to bring to the table.
To challenge. And if you don't challenge what they come back with, then you don't believe in your own abilities.
That's right. That's a start.
It gets us somewhere.
Yeah, it does actually. And look, things are changing. Things are very much changing, and there's so many amazing women who are very, very supportive of each other. And are really actually genuinely cheering each other on.
It's like you've got a promotion, go get it, no, do this. People are like people's biggest cheerleaders or people's biggest downfalls.
Yeah.
But you need a mixture of both, but the ones that are genuine and the ones that are not. And I suppose also just kind of looking at I can't speak. Winding this down a little bit. If you was to say some final words of encouragement for females either looking to say yes or graduates looking to get into the trading space, but as a woman not sure if it's the environment or going into compliance or relocation, what would that be based on your own experience of what you could look back and tell yourself?
Based on my own experience and based on a lot of other people's experience, it actually is, we're just going to go back to the just say yes. If you honestly believe that you have something to give, then just say yes. Look, life is not a one-way road.
No.
And it's not even a one-way highway. We're not going at the one speed on this very nice, like, autobahn that, just goes and you're just going into that one direction. No, you're always going to have ups and downs. Take it as a learning experience, right? Failure is scary, but it's also the biggest educator. People learn more from failure than they do from successes.
It's very true.
And so if you're too scared to fail, you will stagnate your growth. And if you are actually committed to the growth in your career, and even just as a person, you have to take risks, and that means just saying yes. Now, I'm not saying don't know what the risks are and what the outcomes is. Don't just blindly go in there. No, that's not what I'm saying. Is do your research, make it a calculated risk, and then just say yes. Because a lot of times we hold ourselves back because we can't see what's going in front of us.
Cloudy.
Yeah, it's cloudy, right? And so sometimes you have to just stay where you are. Like if this is the time and you're not comfortable with the fact that your future is hazy more than 2 meters away from you, that's fine, stay where you are. I have this tenet that one of the tenets I live by is prosper where you're planted. Wherever you are, prosper there. Feed yourself, right? Invest in yourself. Be really good at what you do. Because when that fog clears up, you are ready and you're equipped and you're a lot more confident in saying yes going forward. So if right now you have to stay, but prosper.
Well, that's me sold. That captured me.
So that when you're ready to go, you're now armed with all of these tools. And yes, it's still scary because you don't know what's going to happen in the future, but you're so much more well equipped, right? Just know when to go and know when to stay. And when the time is to go, go.
Yeah. Well, look, it's been amazing having you as part of this podcast. It's been so insightful, and I find myself coming away from this highly motivated, like captured into everything that we've just spoken about. And you can see from kind of where you started to where you are now, just how much you've been involved in, but how much of that is not just, moving at a pace. It's just saying yes, taking that chance, moving that pace, moving forwards, and just going a little bit with your eyes closed. But then you learn and you capture so much. And I'm sure it's not all been sunshine and roses.
No,
I'm sure it's been some challenging times in there, and that comes as a swing and a roundabout. And I think it's really important to see and to hear that from someone such like yourself. So again, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having me.
It's been a pleasure.
The pleasure's all mine.
Thank you.